Hi,
Hello.
my name is Junius Williams, and I am the host of Everything's Political Podcast. And today we're continuing with our examination of Vote 16. Young people are going to be voting very soon. Now that it's April, they're going to be voting for the first time in the Board of Education elections in Newark, New Jersey. So it's an exciting time. And up to this point, we've been talking to the young people and the people who are helping them get ready. And this time, I'm going to talk to somebody who's indirectly involved, but very much involved nonetheless. And her name is Deborah Smith Gregory. She is the president of the local chapter, the Newark chapter of the NAACP. She's a longtime activist. She has been involved in all kinds of politics, street politics, and electoral politics. And that's why I chose her, because she is a person who's been around and has cared a lot and cares about these kids. Hi, Deborah Smith
Hello.
Gregory.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm going to start with a question about your most recent candidates forum. I should have said the NAACP does candidates forums every year. You can
Right.
count on the NAACP. How long have you been doing the candidates forum for the Board of Education elections?
About 12 years.
Wow,
Mhm.
12 years.
Every year. Like you said,
Every,
that's one forum that you can count on that we're going to have conduct.
and sometimes they get hot and heavy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes they get hot and heavy from the candidate's perspective, and sometimes they get hot and heavy from the audience's perspective.
Well, now this time you did something different. You allowed some of the teenagers, I'm not exactly sure how old they were, but they were probably 16, 17. You
Okay.
allowed them to preside at that candidates forum. Why did you do that?
So, point of correction, we always include the youth in our candidates forum. We took it to another level, if you will, for this particular one. We had the same young people that we had from last year who were instrumental in getting the voting age lowered to 16 through the GEM project. So they were our we asked students to ask questions, and they were our student moderators. But this year, based on what you said earlier about the forums getting hot and heated, last year there was a protest, if you will, because the audience was not allowed to ask direct questions. They were to fill them out on a card, but there was this idea that because they could not hold the mic and ask the question, that they were not being included. Now, history tells us that when if you don't have an organized structure in place for a candidates forum, it becomes someone's platform to vent to and sometimes to attack candidates that they don't care for. So what we decided to do was to look at how we could be more inclusive of the audience, and the young one of the students said something. And this year, we also made sure that they were included in the planning and the preparation. So at one of our prep meetings, we are talking about how we're going to handle the audience with the cards and making sure that some of the questions are asked of the candidates. But we always know that we have more questions than time. And so one of the Nathaniel said, well, why don't we use a mechanism by which we can poll the audience to which questions are most important to them. Like, so how many of the audience say this particular question is the one that they want to hear an answer to. They introduced us to the Menti meter, and I had absolutely no idea what that was. So at another meeting, they explained it to me, and I, being an elder, also said, okay, we can do this, but who's going to run it? Who's going to execute it? Who's going to be the point person for this part? And they said, we have someone. And they brought in a third student because initially we had a male and a female, but they brought in a third student to say, okay, this system, this platform, we can put all the questions. Well, he says, I'll put the questions in. When they come in and they write them on an index card, I'll put them in the computer. And then we will ask them to download an app on their phone, and the questions will pop up, and they're just to rank the questions. And I said, okay, let's see what happens. And it was an experiment. It was a very successful experiment. Um, what I noticed is that people want to be included. They don't want to just watch something. They want the interaction, and this allowed for that. We turned the two adult moderators, Linda Carter, who you know, and Ali McBride, asked questions because there were 10 candidates. We wanted to make sure that all of the candidates had an opportunity to say something. We knew that it was boring to ask each candidate the same questions over and over, so we alternated and just kind of mixed it up. And then when it came time for the students part, I introduced the students and said, they got this. And what I noticed is that people, when they asked them to pull out their phone, people did. And what I also found out later is that people who were watching us on Facebook were also able to use the Mentimeter, which I thought was wow. I thought that was incredible because I wasn't even thinking about people watching. Went really well. In hindsight, what we probably needed to do was to have a large monitor so that everybody could see the questions being uploaded and the top and how many voted for per per question. We did not allow any personal questions to get in because this is not personal. This running for the school board is not a personal issue. It is a community issue. It is someone thinking that they can have a positive impact on our young people. We edit out the personal questions, and it was great. We got a lot of positive feedback. Um, the young man who explained it was extremely patient because we had a multi-generational audience, and so some of the older ones was like, they were looking like, I don't know if I want to do this. And a couple did get up and say, no, I'm out, and left. It just left. But the majority of the audience engaged and felt good about it. And then the questions were asked by the students to the various candidates, alternating so that the candidates would all have an opportunity to answer. It was like the top three questions.
So were the people who got up and leave, I'm sorry, were the people who got up and left, were they some of the regulars?
No, they were people, I would say 70 and older.
Okay. Now tell us, who are these young people?
Nathaniel and Brianna are part of the GEM project. And so they did the spade work for the Vote 16 legislation to be enacted in Newark. They moved the,
Is this Nathaniel Dugwit?
no, this is no, that's Nathan.
Oh,
So
okay.
Nathan
Oh, yeah,
is
that's right.
A Rutgers student
Mm-hmm.
who is finding his voice as well.
Right.
We have to allow the space for the young people to experiment in a safe way,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Nathan was there, but it was Nathaniel and Brianna. So I said Brianna C, Nathaniel E, and Marvin M. And I thought that was
All
kind of
right.
cute because I was protecting their because they are all under 18.
Okay. So these were the young people who were involved in making Vote 16 happen anyway.
The two, Nathaniel and Brianna, were from last year, and they did a lot of the spade work with New Jersey Institute for Social Justice,
Right.
and they visited legislators and they really lobbied for this to happen,
All right.
particularly in Newark.
All
And
right.
the Newark Council got on board and voted for it to happen. Initially, it was supposed to happen at one time, but it didn't. It got postponed, and now here we are.
So they're not exactly uncommon names. I appreciate what you said about them being minors, but they are out there. These young people. As a matter of fact, they've been on this program, so I know exactly who you are talking about. Let me ask you, in
But they but
general,
they brought, but they brought Marvin on board because
Marvin is the new player.
is right the one who orchestrated, if you will, who put in the information from the cards, who uploaded everything, who used Mentimeter, and who explained it to the audience.
All
And
right.
because I told them, I said, this is a good idea, but who's going to do it? Because I knew my capacity would not allow me to. And they said, we got it. So
Mm-hmm.
they're recruiting each other, and that's as it should be.
And that's good because they're using modern technology for the betterment of sensible advocacy. And that's what we want. That's what we don't want machines taking over, but also we don't want to get hung up on just the Einsteins being able to handle it. And it looks like you found somebody who can do all three things, or both of them anyway.
And then I told them because following the 13th on the 22nd, they had their own youth led forum where they did everything. And I explained to them, this was your dress rehearsal. And so when I talked to them about their event, they acknowledged that they felt so much more comfortable and they really felt strong about what they were doing with the young people because they had stood in front of adults that they did not know, that were some were making faces, and so and they were a little nervous, and
Mm-hmm.
admitted that they were a little nervous. So it was good. It was really really good.
So the adults have embraced them and this approach in talking about who's going to run or make policy for the Newark School District.
Yes, they did. There were some people who were reluctant, but the young man, Devin, who explained it so clearly and so easily that he made people feel comfortable that they could do it with their phone.
Now let's talk a little. Let's take a step back. That's one reason why I wanted you to talk to me today is because you have a historical perspective. Not only have you been involved in 12 years for handling this forum, but you've been involved with education advocacy for many many years. We go back. We've always been on the same side. Praise the Lord, because I would because I wouldn't want you working against me. We had all kinds of groups and we've had all kinds of issues, and this is not the time to go into that. That's another program. But
Yeah.
from your perspective, what's important about having young people voting about the people who are supposed to be in charge of policy wise anyway, the Newark School District?
So without getting into, like you said, that's a whole nother story. But historically, the young people that we've worked with collectively, that we've worked with, have been on the front line of wanting to have a voice in the decision making that directly impacts them. We have this tendency to want to make decisions for young people without including them as if we know best. And I would say we don't always know best, but we have to be willing to own that, and then also open to new ideas. One of the student representative from that's now sitting on the board is a very dynamic young woman, Zuri McCune. And I was talking to her. I still go to the board meetings. Whew. Um, as I was talking to her about her impact and effectiveness and her representation of the student body. And so we've had some really good conversations. And one of the things that she did was, with the help of the Board of Education, she did an ad on Instagram about voter registration in the schools. And then she had a town hall as well. What I told her is that this is a recurring issue, long-standing issue, but an important one. And that is that one of the issues that she might want to look at was school lunch. And she did. She looked at, but she called it lunch service, food services. Because what I found, because I'm still going into the schools as well, what I found is that the most of the schools don't make their own lunches anymore. It is brought in from a outside contractor vendor, and it's not how when we went to school and the cafeteria workers cooked that food like your mama cooking your food. It's not like that. And so in one school that I went to and I was talking to a class, they don't eat breakfast because they don't want that. They don't eat lunch. They might have a parfait. So from 8:30 to 2:30, they have a little yogurt parfait. And then we're wondering why they're lethargic or restless or distracted, because for me, I need to eat a good substantial meal that is good to me and good for me. And so she used that, and it's hopefully the superintendent's office will listen to the students and not just dismiss them as they not know what's best for them, because they do know, and we need to respect that.
So, which others, and I'm assuming Zuri was one of the candidates that the students heard from, or the people heard from in general. Who are the candidates
No,
that?
she's not a candidate that's running. She's a student representative on the school board.
Okay,
She
so
represents.
explain that to the people here.
So
In
it's a long-standing practice that the student governments of all the high schools, the student government presidents, and sometimes the senior class will elect a student representative to sit on the board. It is a non-voting position, but they get a chance to articulate concerns of students as well as hear the concerns coming from the board members, coming from the superintendent's report. So Zuri McCune is a senior who is on the current student representative for all of the high school students, well, all of the students, but particularly all of the high school students.
which of the candidates seem to be the most popular with the new voters, the 16, 17-year-olds? Let's just say the young people, not just 16, 17, but young folks, because some of them are, let's say 16 to 24, because that's who is
Well,
in Nate's
they
organization.
they gravitated toward a young man who is in not he's not 16, but he's not 25. And so and some of them knew him because he worked with some students when we were working with students from the Newark Student Union. And so they liked what he said, his concerns, how he carried himself, how he articulated what he felt the issues were, and what was of import. And so they definitely liked that.
Who is he?
Okay, David Dowdy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to check him out.
Yep,
David Dougherty.
yep. They liked. I'm gonna mess up her name. Ka- Kalia Kalia Anderson, who's currently sitting on the board and is the granddaughter of Lenore Holman. Remember her?
Oh, sure.
She's the
Yeah.
she's the granddaughter of Lenore, and so she sits on the board. She filled in for a vacant seat, and so now she's running for the full course of the 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
there were some. There were two slates of people, and there was another slate that I'm not familiar with their names. Their names escape me, but they were on the younger side as well. And there was a little buzz in the audience about that particular slate being more charter proponents than public school proponents, and that divide still is happening, um, where the traditional public school and the charter schools are on two sides.
How many new voters have been registered from the 16-17 population?
2,200.
And among that 2,200, are there organizational preferences for the charter schools, for the regular public schools? Have you heard any conversation about that?
No, and to be candid with you, no, there has not been that kind of conversation, because what happened was the district took ownership of registering the students. And so partnering with the traditional that come in and do voter registration on a regular, like with us, we go into the schools on a regular. The League of Women Voters go into the school. The GEM Project tried to go into the school. New Jersey Institute for Social Justice tried to go into the school. And there was a, a closed atmosphere about coming into the schools. To there was a barrier, if you will, that was put up, of outside groups coming into the schools to register students. It was directives from the superintendent's office that it be done internally through guidance counselors and etc., which I'm not knocking that, but when you don't allow the community access to young people, it's not like civics is being taught. And so we don't just do voter registration, we do voter education as well. They go together. So many people think like, so you have 2,200 young people registered to vote. Those partner organizations like the Institute, they're doing a rock the block to try to raise the level of awareness about voting. There was a community fair that the GEM Project did. And so Victoria Foundation decided to sweeten the pot for more involvement by saying that the schools who either registered the most and they came out to vote, well, registered the most and had the most um, school spirit, if you will, about voting, that they would give them an incentive. And as a matter of fact, I think, well, I know University High School is having a rally and a forum. The forum on the 22nd was student led, by a collaborative effort of youth groups. We don't need to silo our kids. If anything, we need to collectively embrace them. We need to. Like you can give a young person something I can't give. I can give something to a young person you can't give, just by virtue of the fact that you're a male and I'm a female, right? And your experience as a black man in America and my experience as a black woman in America, we're running on the same track, but it's parallel, there. And so it has to be everyone, and not just, okay, we registered all these kids to vote, but no, you can't touch them because we did it. And so that's corny. It is.
So when you say we did it, you mean Newark Public Schools in their decision to register it themselves,
Right.
register them themselves.
Right. Exactly. Now
It's
now I will say this from the students that I've spoken to, because I still have access to young people through a mentoring program that I've been working with forever. And the feedback from the students was that some teachers were all in, and they literally started conducting civics classes, particularly some of the history teachers, which I think is really, really great.
yeah.
So they But then others had a different kind of experience. It depended on what school you went to. And so others at other schools said, yeah, well, our guidance counselor came and registered us to vote. We all had to go to the media center, or they did it during lunch periods, which is what the partner organizations would have done. Come during the lunch periods, and sometimes it's the whole village that raises the child. It's not just school, and it's not just home. It's home and school together. Community.
Now I understand that the pool was 7,000, and you're saying
Six.
2,200.
6,000. The pool was 6,000.
Pool was 6,000. Okay.
And about 2,200. But I want to envision and imagine how many more students we could have registered had the schools been open to receiving partnerships from community organizations. I don't even think, I know we would have reached much more if they did that. And then the governor even came by. He went to data science, he and his wife, and they had some type of incentive there for young people to vote. But just imagine if everyone weighed in, we could have gotten the whole 6,000.
Mm.
Young people, you know, when you start voting, and if you don't get disillusioned, you become a lifelong voter. And right now, the times in which they're living, they're they're as conscious as we were when we were coming up. There's always a crisis that young people have to face, and become the vanguard for. It's always that. But this is like on steroids, this crisis.
Do you think the number of people who are going to vote this year is going to increase significantly because of those 2,200? Are they going to vote? Did they teach their parents how to vote, or influence their parents to come out and vote? Is it
I
going
would
to
hope
be
so.
is it
I
going
would
to
hope.
be any major change since only about 3,000 people voted? Maybe that was at 3% of the registered voters up to that point.
I don't know this year if you will see something significant. I'm pretty sure you will see a bump in that 3% that typically comes out. But I think that, again, with partner organizations doing voter education, I think that makes the difference. And by the time that they figured out that they were being obstructed, the time had pretty much, it's like March 26th, 25th was the last day, right? But it took them that long to figure out, okay, how do we go around this? How do we get through this? The
When
young
you
people
when you say get through this, what do you mean?
through the lockdown
Oh,
of the schools, because you have to be able to have a conversation, right? I had conversations with those three young people. They in turn, there were quite a few young people in the audience because they had let other young people know, right? Like, so I said to you, Nathan was there, one of our mentees was there. So they have their own communication going on. I hope that the turnout increases. But I don't think that we should measure the success of this initiative on this election. If we don't take the time to allow it to play out, and then say in year three, because anything that you undertake, marriage, business, if you don't give it 3 to 5 years, you're not really serious about it. That's just how it is.
is voting the most important political skill for young people today? And that's one part of the question. And then, if they do vote, what other kinds of political acts are they being prepared for in this day and age, 2025?
So the one thing that we're not talking about, these young people are still suffering from this pandemic, post pandemic. People don't want to talk about it, but because I interact with young people, the young people that I mentor, and they're from all over. They're not just from the Newark public schools, they're from the county schools, they're from charter schools, they're from private schools. There's some common disturbances for me, and that is that the emphasis is so much on passing a test that the push for critical thinking has diminished. That's on one end. And then on the other end, the devices that they use, phones and text messages and what have you, have severely interrupted their ability to communicate with each other and with the world, because all of them speak in very hushed tones. They've been doing that since the pandemic. Those hushed tones where I thought it was me. Okay, I was like, okay, I'm an elder, I my hearing, but so I asked other people, can you hear? Did you hear that? And they're like, no. So it's almost like an isolation. Is voting the most important part? Voting is a part of a two part, because voting without education, without information, it cancels it out. So that's why we're in the situation on the federal government, where people just came out and voted and didn't stop to think about the educational part of, okay, who is this person? He's telling us negative things, and yet he wants us to vote for him. Should I? And or I'm not going to do anything because it has nothing to do with me. How people like that?
That's interesting. You kind of substantiated my most recent theory that I've been mulling around. And I talked about the need to be able to teach and touch.
Yep.
And that's what we were able to do. And
Experiential learning is real. So with our group, we've been on Zoom. We meet on Sundays, Zoom. The month of March, we started meeting in person because we needed to. The difference, oh my goodness, night and day. The energy is even different. Coming through the the ether is one thing, but being in the presence, the physical presence of someone is something else again. And we've been able to really work with them and get them motivated for what they have to do.
well, on that note, I think we're going to have to continue that conversation. So I want to thank you, Deborah, my good
Hey,
friend.
Thank you for inviting me.
Very happy. Like I said, we've always been on the same side of the issues.
Right. And I mean, so we've had our disagreements, but the thing to learn is that because you disagree with someone does not mean that you can't work with that person,
Right.
right? And so that's a lesson that needs to be learned, because now is, people say, oh, well, they're very caught up in their feelings about someone and say, no, I can't deal with that. But we need all hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about the survival or the thriving of a group. So we better get with the program.
And on that note, thank you again.
Take
And
care.
we'll see you the next time, folks out there who are listening and watching us. We're going to be able to talk to some of the students and some of the other people who voted in this election, and that's what we're going to talk about the next time we talk together on Vote 16. Did it matter that we had those 2,200 folks voting? We shall soon find out.
Everything's Political podcast is produced by the Center for Education and Juvenile Justice Incorporated. The narrator and chief consultant on the project is Junius Williams. The cinematographer for Series 5 is Brian Timmons, and the editor, Harry Kafka, Studio Mosaic under Francesca Dulce Larson, manages additional production and promotional efforts. We wish to thank the Turrell Foundation for its continued generous contributions that make the podcast possible. You can catch new episodes monthly and bonus content released weekly across YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If you like what you see, please like, follow, and subscribe, and of course, stay political.